Hola everyone and welcome to Learn Spanish with Faraz. In today's class, we'll be dealing with verb ser. But before we do that, we need to know all the subject pronouns in Spanish language. Now, what are subject pronouns? Subject pronouns are I, you, he, she, they, we, and so on. Now, when you're using a subject pronoun with a verb, the subject pronoun is always the one performing the action. For example, I play cricket. So I am the one who is playing the cricket. I am the one who is performing the action. She knows Juan. Here the subject pronoun is she. She is the one who knows the Juan. Who knows Juan, sorry. We watch a movie. Now, we are performing the action of watching a movie, so we here is the subject pronoun. Now, in English, the verb is always conjugated according to the subject, right? If I say I, then I'll have to say play. If I want to use the verb play with another subject, let's say if I want to use it with she, then I say she plays. Similarly, in Spanish, all the verbs are conjugated according to their subjects. Now, the verb ser in English is to be. Now, in English, the verb to be is conjugated as is, are, or am. So, verb ser in English is to be, which is conjugated as is, are, or am. You use this verb when you want to tell what something is. For example, I am Faraz. She is a doctor. We are Mexicans. So you always conjugate the verb according to your subject. For we use are, for she you use is, and for I you use am. Similarly, in Spanish, the verb is always conjugated according to your subjects. Now, what are your subject pronouns in Spanish? I is yo, you is tú. So this is you informal, and there is a formal you as well, which is usted. Now you have he, which is él, she, which is ella, we, nosotros, and then you have you plural. I'm just going to write it as you all, which is you plural. You don't say y'all, but to avoid any confusion, I'm just going to write it as you all, which is vosotros. And then you have they. Now you have a masculine form of they, which is ellos, and then you have a feminine form of they, which is ellas. So if I'm addressing a group of girls, I would refer to them as ellas. If I'm addressing a group, if I'm addressing a group of boys, I would refer to them as ellos. And then obviously you have you all formal, which is ustedes. So these are all your subject pronouns. You have yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Now, again, your subjects are yo, then you have tú, then you have él, ella, usted, then you have nosotros. Nosotros also has a feminine form, nosotras. So, for example, if a group of girls are addressing themselves, they would refer to themselves as nosotras. If a group of boys was addressing themselves, they would refer to themselves as nosotros. Then you have vosotros, vosotras. Then you have ellos, ellas, ustedes. Right? So these are all your subject pronouns. You have I, you have you, informal, you have he, she, then you, formal, then you have we, then you have you, plural, then you have they, masculine, they, feminine, and you all, which is you plural, in sorry, formal. So these are all your subject pronouns. Now remember, whenever you're addressing a mixed group in Spanish, you would always refer to them as ellos. Remember this, whenever you are talking about a mixed group, or whenever you're talking about plural, even if that group has half masculine nouns and half feminine nouns, the plural will always be masculine. Let's say if I'm talking about a group of students, and let's say there are 9 girls in that group and only 3 boys in that group, you would still refer to them as ellos. So if I'm saying they are students, I would use ellos for them. If all the students were girls, in that case, I would use ellas. So remember this, Spanish is kind of a sexist language. So the plural always becomes masculine. Remember that. So these are your verbs. Oh, sorry. These are your subject pronouns. Yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Now our verb is ser, which is in English to be, just conjugated as is, are, am. Now I told you all the verbs are always conjugated according to your subjects. So the conjugation of verb ser for the subject pronoun yo is soy. For tú, it is eres. And for él, ella, usted, it is es. So if I wanted to say I am, that would be yo soy. If I wanted to say you are, that would be tú eres. If I wanted to say he is, that would be él es. If I wanted to say she is, that would be ella es. And if I wanted to say you are, but in a polite way or in a formal manner, then I would say usted es. Now, let's say if I'm talking to my boss and I'm being polite with my boss, obviously, and I'm being formal. So if I'm saying you are Mr. Garcia, I would say usted es señor. Señor is Mr. Garcia. But if you were my friend, I would just use tu form with you. So I will say you are Garcia, tú eres Garcia, right? Pretty easy. So if you're using the polite form, mostly you use the formal form when you're meeting somebody for the first time, or when you are in a professional environment, or if you're going to a shop to buy something, when you're communicating with people in stores, you always use a state form. Mostly you use a state form with people you don't know or with people that you're meeting for the first time. So the conjugation for yo is soy, tú is eres, él, ella, usted is es. For nosotros o nosotras, the conjugation is somos. For vosotros, vosotras, conjugation is sois. And for ellos, ellas, ustedes, the conjugation is son. Now, if I wanted to say, I am, I am Pedro, in that case, I would say, yo soy Pedro. If I wanted to say he is Pedro, then it would be él es Pedro. If I wanted to say she is Ana, in that case it would be ella es Ana. Now, in Spanish, a student is estudiante, and the plural of estudiantes, estudiantes. Now, singular, plural, masculine, feminine, we'll do it in a separate class. In our next class, we'll be dealing with nouns because every noun in Spanish has a gender. So we'll be dealing with masculine, feminine, and singular and plural nouns. But for now, a student is estudiante and students are estudiantes. Now, let's use the conjugation that we have learned to make some sentences. Now, if I wanted to say you are a student, I would say tú eres estudiante. If I wanted to say you are Juan, tú eres Juan. But if I was using the formal form in order to make the same sentences, I would have to use the subject pronoun usted. In that case, it would be as usted es estudiante or usted es Juan. So here I'm being more polite or formal. The first one is more informal when you're talking to your friends, your colleagues, your relatives, your parents, your grandparents. Doesn't matter. If you know the person, you can use the tu form. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to a person who is elder to you or if you're talking to your grandparents, you don't have to use a step form with them. You use tu form with people that you're not familiar with, or when you are in a professional setting, or when you're talking to people in a professional environment. Different countries have different tolerance for tu or usted. Anyway, now I told you nosotros has two forms. Nosotros was we, nosotros or nosotras. Now let's say if I want to say we are students and if it is a mixed group of students, then I would use nosotros because I told you plural is always masculine. Then I would say nosotros somos estudiantes. But if I were addressing, if a group of girls were addressing themselves, they would refer to themselves as nosotras. So if all the students were girls, then they would probably say nosotras somos estudiantes. Okay, now let's get back to her conjugation. Pretty simple. Yo soy, tú eres, él, ella, usted es, nosotros somos, vosotros sois, ellos, ellas, ustedes son. And that's it for verb ser. And you can make any sentences you want using this verb if you want to tell what something is. For example, if I want to say Juan is a doctor. Now, Juan is a third person singular. Juan is he. So you will use es for it. Juan es, a doctor is médico. You can also say doctor. Juan es médico. Or Juan es doctor. If I want to say Ana is a student. Ana es estudiante. If I want to say we are students, nosotros somos estudiantes. If I want to say you all are students, vosotros sois estudiantes. If I wanted to say they are students, ellos son estudiantes. Pretty simple. Yo soy, tú eres, él, ella, usted es, nosotros somos, vosotros sois, ellos, ellas, ustedes son. Yo soy, I am, tú eres, you are, él es, he is, ella es, she is, ustedes, you are formal, nosotros somos, we are, vosotros sois, you all are, ellos son, they are, Ellas son, they are, but feminine. Ustedes son, you all are, but formal. Okay, now let's make some sentences. I am Juan and you are Pablo. Now, am in Spanish is E, this Y, which is pronounced as E. We are going to go through the rules of pronunciation in our next class as well. I am Juan and you are Pablo. Yo soy Juan y tú eres Pablo. If I wanted to say we are Juan and Pablo, then it would be nosotros somos Juan y Pablo. Now, let's say if I want to say she is Anna and she is a student. I can say ella es Ana y I can write ella es estudiante, or I don't have to write this. I have already mentioned ella here, so I don't have to repeat it again. I can just say ella es Ana y es estudiante. So once you have mentioned the subject, and if the subject is already given and we already know by the context what we're talking about, then you sometimes you can just omit the subject as well. For example, instead of saying yo soy Juan, you can just say soy Juan, because obviously soy is the conjugation for subject I, so it is already implied that I is there, so you don't have to say yo soy. You can just say soy Juan. Both are completely fine. You can say yo soy Juan, you can just say soy Juan. For example, if I wanted to say we are teachers, I can say somos profesores, or I can just say nosotros somos profesores. Right? Pretty simple. So you can omit the subject if the context is clear. You don't have to mention ella or yo or nosotros. You can just say soy Juan, somos Juan y Pablo, es Ana. If the context is clear, you don't have to write the subject. But since we are learning, try to write the subject. Okay, now I'm going to give you some translations and I'm going to give you the solutions for these translations at the end of the class. So try to do these translations by yourself. And after that, once you're done with doing all your translations, you can go towards the end of the video and you can check those translations and you can figure out what are the errors that you made and you can fix those errors. That's how you learn a language. You make some errors, then you learn about those errors, and the next time you fix them. Every language is learned that way. Nobody's going to become perfect the moment they start to learn a language. You're going to be making a lot of errors. That's the way you learn a language. You make errors, you make mistakes, you learn from them, you correct them, you make errors again, you learn from them. Next time you make sure that you don't make the same error again. And when you keep on doing this, you become really good at the language and you avoid committing errors. Now I'm going to share a list of translations with you. Make sure that you do all those translations, write them down on a sheet of paper. Once you're done doing those translations, go towards the end of this video and you can check the solutions and you can also check the mistakes that you made and you can correct them. So your translations are, the first one is I am Juan and she is Anna. She is student. Remember, whenever you're talking about professions in English, you always use the indefinite article a. You say, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer. But in English, oh, sorry, in Spanish, you never say that. You don't say, I am a student. You just say, I am a student. You don't say, I am a doctor. You say, I am doctor. So you don't actually use this article a when you're talking about professions in Spanish. So instead of saying, I am a doctor, you just say, yo soy doctor. Right? You don't have to say, you just say, I am a doctor. We are Juan and Pedro. They are Ana and Maria. He is Beja or Bella, and I am Pablo. You all are students. They are students. Masculine. You all are teachers. Formal. So you have to use the usted form here. She, sorry, mm, he is Andreas, and we are Ana and Paula. And the last one, you are a singer. A singer in Spanish is cantante. And you have to write this one in the formal form. That means you have to use this form. So here are your translations for today. Make sure that you do these translations. And once you're done doing these translations, go towards the end of this video and check your answers. Thank you for attending my class. In the next class, we'll be doing with rules of pronunciation and some Spanish professions and some Spanish nouns as well.